Hi everybody, this is Dr. George Pereira for IHS and OUM. Welcome to the course Listening and Speaking in ESL. So let us proceed, and our first topic is the process of listening. The process of listening in daily life. We communicate in a variety of settings and on various topics. So from individual, for example, listening to your favorite CD, to interpersonal, gossiping on the telephone with your best friend, and group based, hearing the announcement at Mid Valley Mega Mall, and so forth. So the listening involves a response to others, which is interactional, and while others do not involve a response, non-interactional. So we will look at the different types of listening. So now we are going to start a second close scrutiny of listening with highlight on two facts. First, listening and speaking are two sides of the same coin. So it follows that in many circumstances, listening is a reciprocal skill. Speakers and listeners exchange roles all the time. You speak, others listen. Others speak, you listen, and so forth. Reciprocal. So secondly, listening and reading involve interaction with the text. Although this is kind of different in linguistic decoding skills, it could be visual or oral, the cognitive strategies underlying effective listening will be pretty similar to those that underlie effective reading. We skim and we scan. So, listening and reading are selective. So we were discussing about the connection between listening and speaking, then listening and reading. There are similar things in those. So to communicate effectively, do you think it is essential for us to be skillful in listening and speaking? So you have to think about that answer. So what is your answer to that? So take a few moments, you can stop the video, answer that, and then proceed. Okay, let us go ahead. What is the relationship between listening and speaking? And I would add, what is the relationship between listening and reading? So answer it and let us proceed. Listening and speaking. These two are complementary skills, equally needed for successful communication. We cannot reciprocate effectively if we cannot listen to what was said to us. And of course, it involves understanding. Listening and speaking are normally taught as separate skills. Speaking is done after listening, not while listening. So reciprocal listening is a key point, a vital skill in successful communication, as we have discussed above. But sadly, this is neglected. So then, such a practice also encourages a passive view of listening, which is contrary to active listening. So successful listening is a purely receptive activity, reciprocal. They merely receive and record what is heard. That is not enough, but it has to be reciprocal, not receptive, just receive, but it has to be reciprocal. So you and I know that this is far from true. We will take up this issue later in the topic. So it is not passive, but it has to be active. It's not just receptive, but also it has to be reciprocal. So studies on listening and speaking show that effective speaking depends on successful listening. for both, for the language one or the first language and second language learners. So communication experiments show that speakers performed more effectively after they have become listeners on a similar task. So listening skills are very important in this regard. So listening skills should be practiced with adequate practice in both reciprocal and non-reciprocal listening. Non-reciprocal is more receptive. Reciprocal means give and take, receive and the sender, both interactions happen. So based on your experience and observation, what is your opinion on listening and speaking? Are both the skills correlated? Think about your answer for a while. You can stop the video and think about the answer and then proceed. What is the connection between listening and reading? That is the other side of the coin. Listening and speaking, now listening and reading. Listening and reading are related in several ways. Both skills involve the receiving, visual or auditory receiving, and comprehending of input. You have to comprehend while you listen, while you read, all of which are not directly observable. They differ in processing mode and the ways the information is packaged, though they differ. You have already been exposed to them in your other modules. Traditionally believes that listening, by virtue of interdependence to speaking, are skills are mastered well before reading instruction began, as reading was considered a later development. So that was traditionally held. However, studies on the development of these two skills show that the development of listening and reading skills show no ceiling effect. They are related in a way. So everything as from a holistic approach. Both skills could be improved upon through explicit practice, regardless of age and proficiency level. Remember that point. Explicit practice for both skills and then the proficiency level. So listening, speaking, and listening, reading. Research also shows that there is a general language processing skill that influences performance in listening and reading. Comprehension, the understanding is involved in reading as well as in listening. In particular, it is the ability to consider each sentence as a complete unit and each text as a unified semantic whole that appear to be just as important and difficult when listening as it is when reading. So let us proceed to the next slide. So we can conclude that effective listening skills could only improve both listening and reading skills for language 1 and language 2 learners. And of course, listening and speaking are related. So, we are going to another topic, listening comprehension. So what is listening comprehension? You can see here, you hear, then you perceive, and those two should be involved for active listening. You hear and perceive. The whole process between sound and perception that goes as signals to the brain, and then you activate your listening skills. So hearing, sound, is the basis of language perception, and perception is the basis of listening. So it is a process, listening process. Understand the role of hearing is understanding language. So hearing is the basis of language perception, and perception is the basis of listening. So when we understand how we hear, we can begin to understand how hearing is complemented by thinking and interpretation processes. So let us start with how we hear sounds. So how sounds are heard? Sounds surround us. So you are exposed to articulatory and acoustic phonetics. So let us look at the hearing mechanism, the ear and how it works. So this is a picture, and this is the anatomy of the ear. So I will focus more on three sections: the inner ear, the middle ear, the outer ear. So this is the outer ear, this whole section, and the middle ear and the inner ear. So all these things are connected to the brain. So these have their own connection with the sound waves here, and this is signals are sent for perception to the brain. Now there are some videos I have introduced, so you can look at these videos and learn more. So the videos are actually attached somewhere here, so you can watch these videos all about the place of articulation, about the ear and so forth. So let us go back. The two main responsibilities of the ear are hearing and balance. We hear and we balance our body. The ear has three parts: outer ear, middle ear and the inner ear. The outer ear, the part that we can see, is composed of the auricle or the pinna, functions to modify incoming sound, particularly the higher frequencies, and allows us to locate the source of the sound, while the outer ear or auditory canal delivers sound to the middle ear. The middle ear is a small cavity with the eardrum. So the main function of the middle ear is to ensure efficient transfer of sound to the inner ear, where it is processed into a signal that our brain recognizes. The middle ear is also connected to the throat by a narrow channel. The inner ear contains the most important parts of the hearing mechanism. The two chambers are called vestibular labyrinth and cochlea. I may mispronounce, we have to double check the pronunciation here. So this is the mechanism of the ear, and of course you can watch the videos and learn more on YouTube about the mechanism of the ear. Then here, in simple terms, when sound waves from the world outside strike the eardrum, it vibrates. These vibrations from the eardrum pass through the bones of the middle ear and into the inner ear through the oval window. They then are disseminated into the cochlea, where they are converted into electrical impulses and are transmitted to the brain via the auditory nerve. How speech is heard. You have read how sounds are heard. Now that whole process in the ear. Now, how do you think speech starts? Does speech also go through a certain process? Speech perception begins with categorical perception, or to put it in terms, by identifying phonemes. English phonemes are classified into consonants and vowels. It's in the figure. So this is a consonant sound chart. You can look at it here. So just go through it, and all these sections here. These are also in the videos that I have attached to. So you can go through this chart. Okay, so let us proceed. So with the consonant chart, we are going to move to the vowel chart. Is here, the front, central, back. Okay, so with that, we will introduce you to these uh, YouTube clips, so you can even go into these PowerPoint slides that I have uploaded on Moodle and go through these videos. That then you will get a clear understanding of this section. Now, consonants are described in terms of voicing, place of articulation, and manner of articulation. So all these are in the videos. Please watch the videos. Then vowels are described in terms of lip rounding, tongue height, and tongue position. So in normal speech, these phonemes do not occur in isolation. So phonemes that comes from phonetics. So these are the distinct units of sound in a specified language. For example, P, B, D. So for example, pat, bad, bat. Different sounds. So there is articulation that comes with phonemes. Okay. Speech is not made up of individual consonants and vowels, but is sounds that flow into each other. So during speech, the articulators, consonants and vowels are in constant movement. That forms into words, words into sentences, sentences into what do you call conversation, so discourse. During speech, the articulators are in constant movement. We start making a sound before completing the sound before it. A sound will be influenced by sounds before and after it, causing it to change. The phonemes are said to go through allophonic variations, which delete, add, and modify sounds present in a normal pronunciation of a word. So these allophonic variations include three things: assimilation, insertion, and deletion. Allophonies or allophonic variations, under that allophonic or allophonies, any of the various phonetic realizations of a phoneme in a language. So for example, pin is aspirated or unaspirated spin, spin, pin, spin. So these are the variations in the phonemes. Okay, so having said that, let us move to the next. Assimilation makes sound become more like an adjacent sound next to sound in terms of some articulatory features such as voicing, place, or manner of articulation. Voicing assimilation occurs when adjacent sounds come to agree with one another in terms of voicing. So for example, the pronunciation of the plural S usually agrees with the consonants of words. So one example of the voiced is chosen for words ending in a voiced consonant: cat, cats, dog, dogs, cats, dogs, Z sound. Okay. Speakers often insert sounds into words, the most common being the schwa, the Q, the unstressed central vowel. This may be done to break up awkward consonant clusters. So examples are given here. So you can go through some of these examples. For example, athletes. And then lastly, native English speakers often delete sounds, especially unstressed vowels. For example, family. The I is unstressed. Family. Family. So unstressed and thus deleted in casual speech, yielding family. So this is all about sounds and sound patterns and how these things are developed into phonemes, and the phonemes have variations. So that's what we have been discussing so far. Please watch more videos on this and you will be clearer. And also listen to British accent, American accent, and see how we pronounce. So we see the differences based on native and non-native English speakers. So what are phonemes and alphonemes? So these are clips that I have put here. So you can watch these videos, download the hard copy of this version, and you will have access to these links. From Moodle, you can do that. Now, alphonic variations include assimilation, insertion, deletion. Assimilation includes voicing, place, manner of voicing. So those are the variations. Here is a description of these variations. In addition to categorical perception, speech perception is aided by two features. First, length, frequency, and loudness. The length, frequency, and loudness to help us identify speech sounds accurately. So, question could be, what are the features in speech perception? There are two, length, frequency, and loudness. The second one is we can only perceive continuous speech within the context. The second one is the context. So let's go to the first one. As speech is produced at a fast rate, approximately 150 words per minute, and our auditory system can only process a limited number of sounds, we use the features above to help us perceive speech, the length of it, the frequency of it, the loudness of it. These features are redundant and enable us to infer or make guesses about what we hear even in a noisy environment. We're trying to make sense even in a noisy environment. We especially get the concepts and interpret the things. We use redundancy method to avoid some of the unnecessary jargon, all that, propositions and so forth, but we get the concepts in the conversation. Secondly, we can only perceive continuous speech within a context. This means that we do not decipher sounds, syllables, and words in isolation. So it has to be continuous speech and we recognize the words. Okay, so let us move. Regular speech, speech produced by fluent speakers like the native speakers, is naturally full of allophonic variations. Allophonic variations like family, family, family. So that type of thing. So certain things are, omitted. These processes are completely normal and are expected. Without them, speech may be incomprehensible. For the speaker, they make pronunciation easier, while for the listener, the processes serve to eliminate phonetic difficulties. Then we are going to move into another section, that is from sounds. We are going to move into recognizing words. Recognizing words. How has your listening and speaking skills improved over the years? In learning a few words of a language unfamiliar to you, take note of how you recognize the words and how quickly you do it. Next level of perception is word level. Words play a central role. Learners of second or foreign language first and foremost want to learn words. Without words, there is no communication. So how do we recognize words and how quickly do we do so? Earlier we saw the sounds and the certain sounds that forms words, phonemes. Now, we perceive words by using prominence or stress, intonation, patterns, and non-verbal clues. That's how we recognize the words. Speech is produced in spurts called pause-defined units. Pause-defined units. As we listen, we normally analyze speech immediately. Or analyze, pass means analyze speech immediately into chunks of meaningful language. That's very important. Speech immediately into chunks of meaningful language. That is grammatical group of words rather than as strings of individual words. Chunks. That is very important, especially to study the meaning of words, to study the language, study in chunks. Then we identify the most prominent audible parts of the pause unit and fill in the missing parts. The most prominent audible parts of a pause unit are, that means a whole unit where we pause, content words, nouns, verbs, adjectives, all related to the content. And less prominent audible parts are function words, prepositions, articles, and pronouns. This is because prominent stress words tend to carry the most information in a phrase. So that's very important. Content words and function words. Next, we also understand pause-defined units through intonation patterns. A rise in tone indicates information that is already known, and that is the given information, while a falling intonation indicates new information. We also use nonverbal clues to perceive prominence. These include gestures depicting action, shapes, rhythm, pace of events, and spatial relationships. So these are three things that we have been discussing. Here we have nonverbal clues and the other things that that is important in listening. So let us move to recognizing words. So here is a chart. Words are recognized in listening through content words and removing function words. The non-verbal clues are action, shapes, rhythm, pace, partial relationship. Then words also intonation patterns. Intonation patterns. That is the rise in tone and the fall in intonation. That is how the word recognition in listening occurs. So how quickly we recognize the words? The answer depends on word frequency. How quickly we recognize the words. So that depends on word frequency, how often a word occurs in a listener's listening vocabulary. If we don't use these words for a long time, so it's very difficult. So word frequency is important. Then the presence of competitors, that means the similar words, competitive words, similar words, and meaning and context, a word's relationship to the larger meaning of a sentence and utterance. So the meaning of the whole sentence in relation, the word's relationship to that sentence, and the context in which the conversation happens. So word frequency, presence of competitors, and meaning and context for recognizing quick recognition of words. We can recognize words we rarely use, and we can often guess the meaning of new words from a context. How it has been shown that for all the knowledge we have of words, for the purpose of language use, we actually only need to know certain words, because these words occur more frequently and are therefore used to represent more of what we think about and need to express and understand. Furthermore, anticipation assists in word recognition. That is another point. This has to be highlighted. Anticipation assists recognition. You actually need to know only a fraction of words in a language in order to communicate. So, given our ability to infer from context and fill in missing links, that's very important. Infer the context and fill the missing links. So, word recognition should not be a major problem for fluent users of a language. So, research on word recognition show that when we hear speech, the presentation of competitors, similar words, that means words like the ones you already heard, tends to speed up recognition, while the presentation of different words unlike those you already heard, has the opposite effect. So, it doesn't speed up. This again is due to anticipation effects. We also tend to recognize frequently heard words more quickly than unfamiliar or rarely used words. The same thing in other words. Estimating the meaning of a word will influence the speed of recognition. So that is a word meaning. Estimating the meaning of a word will influence the speed of recognition. We normally estimate the meaning intended by the speaker through the context of the sentence utterance. So this is such a natural process that we never give it a second thought. However, ambiguous words will stop us short and draw our attention to the actual process. So for example, the names. There is a telephone call for you. Who is it? Paul. What is the problem in this conversation? Which Paul? There may be so many Pauls. Even I know many Pauls. Which Paul? Who is that particular person? So it is clear that Zuzi must know more than one Paul. So the name Paul becomes ambiguous. So another possible source of ambiguity is homophones. Homophones. Words that have the same sound but different spelling. So that is something that we had to pay attention to. So the source of ambiguity, because of so-called words that have the same sound but different spelling. Homophone. So these are homophones. Some, bear, meat, scene, to, see. However, ambiguity related to homophones is rare in listening because competing words are seldom used in the same context. So that is also there. Then also we have another type of ambiguity, that is what we call homonyms. So that is another one in word recognition involves homonyms. Words that have the same spelling but different meanings. Same spelling but different meaning. For example, bank of a river, place of a business. More on the skin or an animal. Bark of a tree, of a dog. So we have ambiguity caused by another one, and that is another point that we are going to discuss, and that is we call it the use of a word which has several related meanings. So that is polysemy, caused by polysemy, the use of a word which has several related meanings. For example, the words head can mean many, run can have different meanings. Head can refer to a person's head, the head of any organization, and to the action of directing, as into head the new government. Similarly, run can refer several actions related to the basic meanings of moving quickly. Clocks run, trains run, companies run, and so forth. Then we are going to go into another section from sounds and words into processing sentences, the sentence. Beyond words, how do we perceive sentences, utterances? We know that the sentence processing starts with parsing, that is, dividing the speech we hear into constituents or chunks or grouping of meaning. In simple terms, this means as listeners, we use our knowledge of grammar to divide the stream of speech into grammatical categories and relationships. So parsing is natural, something we automatically do as listeners. Parsing also helps us to anticipate what a speaker is likely to say next and to fill in parts which we did not hear or attend to. So parsing involves two simultaneous processes. The two are the division of speech sounds into grammatical categories and the division of speech sounds into relational groups. Speech sounds into grammatical categories, speech sounds into relational groups. So put in words we hear into the grammatical categories. So in all languages we have grammatical categories like noun, verb, adjective, adverb and preposition. So in parsing, we are putting into chunks or groups, we must start with some kind of a co-unit for all languages. This will be a verb. So the basic action. Most utterances have a clear verb. The basic action is stated. Sometimes no action is stated. In these cases, we assume a simple link-in or existence relationship. For example, this is my house. The second simultaneous process is identifying the constituents by their relationship to each other. So, Philemo case relational grammar, where the constituents are identified by their relationships to the verb in a sentence or utterance. So, for example, the verb is related to the in relation to the verb. So let us say agent, that is based on the primary doer of an action. Patient, receiver of an action. Object, that which is acted upon by the action. Instrument, means of doing an action. Goal, destination or desired endpoint. Temporal, when action is carried out. Locative, the action is carried out. So other less common cases include past, way of motion, source, manner, extent, reason, beneficiary, and so forth. So in normal conversations, we listen to continuous speech. This means we do not listen to single utterances and pass sentence by sentence but across several utterances and at the rates they are being spoken. So we do this in order to find coherence, logical connections, to make sense of the ideas in the conversation. Throughout the conversation, we normally listen for two basic cohesion processes in the conversation: co-referencing and ellipsis. So that is, those are two things we listen. So let us proceed. In speech, the things that we talk about, people, places, objects, actions, qualities, are likely to be mentioned and referred to several times. So this is called, termed as co-referencing, and it can be expressed in several ways. What a fully repeated form. With a fully repeated form. I respect N, Amir N. Amir has been dedicated, supported. Partially repeated, co-referencing. I respect N, Amir. Amir has been a dedicated supporter. With a lexical substitution. I respect N, Amir. That man has been a dedicated supporter. So co-referencing. Then we know the connection. This person is talking about that person. In order to pass across utterances successfully, we need to be able to correctly identify when the same thing is being referred to. The second cohesion process is filling in ellipses. That means abbreviated contractions. Much of the message is not explicitly stated. It is ellipted. For example, do you work in KL or Kuala Lumpur every day? No, Mondays and Tuesdays. Do you drive in? No, the commuter. So abbreviated, but still the message is understood. So, like categorical perception and word recognition, parsing appears very complex to describe, yet we seem to do it effortlessly. So this is because the characteristics of spoken language allows us to listen effectively. These characteristics include more topic comment structures, frequent use of coordinating conjunctions, less dense, looser information organization, some incomplete units, lots of fillers and interactive markers, and lots of repetition. So that are the characteristics of spoken language. The question, what are the characteristics of spoken language according to the research conducted by Rost? Then we are going to another section, processing discourse. The word, sentence, then the discourse. As human beings, we consider ourselves rational creatures. In connected discourse, the need for reasoning is particularly acute because, as we have discussed in the last section, much of the content is never really stated at all. So reasoning is very important. So what was said and the reasoning process. So that has to take place in a discourse. So you can read this, take your time, you can stop the video and read it. Much of the language comprehension is the process of reasoning with incomplete information. The conclusions we make must be true. They must be based on the premises and assertions, on the other hand. The conclusion should have a higher information value than any of the premises. You know, the premises are the statements that make, based on those statements, we make the conclusions. When you are in the premises, you can't conclude or come to judgments. So you have to listen to the whole premises and then come to the conclusion. It's logical understanding of the conversation process. So, on the other hand, they should not repeat the premises, but what they had to say with all the premises. So the conclusion should contain relevant information that is useful in the situation. If this is confusing, this is what he's trying to say. much of language comprehension is the process of reasoning. So in the process of reasoning, there are premises that you have to understand, assertions. Premises means the assertions, and these assertions end up with a conclusion which has the high information rate. So that is the process of reasoning. Beyond the sentence, we process discourse using logical reasoning. So much of the reasoning in the process of listening to a discourse is accomplished through claims and supporting grounds. Claims are assertions that are made by the speaker. Then supporting grounds are the facts or ideas. Another important tool that we utilize to process discourse is schema. So that is also very important for us to know, which can be defined as an organizational system for keeping topical knowledge or knowledge of the topic. So discourse schema process has the schema. So that is very, very important in the conversation. So organizational system for keeping topical knowledge. So look also for the dictionary meaning. One meaning is drawing that represents an idea or theory or makes it easier to understand. So you have a mental map in order to understand what is going on in the discourse. We have an infinite number of schemas in our memory based on our experience and imagination. We have patterns in our brain based on previous experience and imagination. That is why sometimes while a person is in the premises, we guess that this is what the person is going to say, but it can change because premises, and then it's followed by the conclusions, what the speaker is saying in listening. So we have to go through that whole process. Our schema can be concrete, memories of tangible experience, or abstract, memories of concepts, love, responsibility, and so forth. Tangible means, touchable, and is the name of a place, and so forth. Read the following story and answer the questions at the end. So that is in the book, so you can do that. So that is not included here, so it's in the textbook. So the schema theory, the background knowledge. Schema is also the mental patterns that we have based on our past experiences. So that is also called the background knowledge. Can be used to explain how we understand complex discourse. That's the prior knowledge that we use to understand the present complex discourse. So that will be used to fill the missing parts. So the schema theory can also be used to explain how we misunderstand and how we fail to understand discourse at times, because sometimes with the premises we may use the schema or the background knowledge and jump to conclusions before the speaker is giving the conclusion in the speech. Then the speaker will say, no, I meant something else. So in this topic, we are introduced to the process of listening in daily life. We looked at what is meant by the term listening. So we examine how sounds and speech are heard, phoneme, word, sentence, to discourse level. So thank you. And this is Dr. George Pereira for IHS and OUM. So please go through this video several times, and you can read the textbook, and also you can prepare for your assignment, which should be discussed later. So thank you very much.